Dear friends, welcome to the Health Seeker, a special episode of our program, because we want to tell you about a research that has brought important results on the effectiveness of Life 120 lifestyle. And with us, we have science popularizer Adriano Panzironi. Welcome, Mr. Panzironi.
Thank you and welcome to our viewers.
Let's talk about this research right away. What is it?
Let's say I decided to carry out this scientific study to prove the effectiveness of the Life 120 lifestyle after all the criticism I have received over the years, where critics were saying and stating that it is not possible to heal with a proper lifestyle. Well, this longitudinal observational research actually proves that.
Here you decided then to do this study, and you have enclosed it here in the book Living to 120 The Healings, a book written for hands with journalist Francesco Gianotti. And however, I want to ask you right away one very important thing. This title, The Healings, this is a word that you have really caused you a lot of criticism, a controversial word.
You are right, because actually this book was initially supposed to be called The Testimonies, but then I decided before going to print to call it The Healings, because actually the results that we got with this observational study makes us understand that really these are healings. So it is important, in my opinion, to call a spade and not to be afraid, instead of just making claims so that we are not criticized.
Look, you mentioned that it is important to call this book Healings. However, I think it is also important to understand what healings mean to you.
Certainly the word healings needs to be contextualized, because there are pathologies that can hardly be called healed. For example, if we take the case of cancer, obviously dogmatic medicine tells us that one can only call a person with cancer cured if after 5 years there are still no cancer cells present. In fact, for this reason, even in this study, we did not want to include this pathology. In reality, however, there are so many other pathologies that can be called cured, because upon discontinuation of those foods that I consider to be real poisons, people become healthy again to such an extent that they no longer suffer from that pathology. So it is correct to call these problem resolutions as true healings that obviously will be able to return to these diseases again, where the person returns to eating what are the typical dishes of the Mediterranean diet, such as bread, pasta, pizza, potatoes, rice, and legumes.
And cause these pathologies. Look, let's talk right away then about this court. The court means that you have selected 1,000 people. We can see right away the first slide to see how this court is composed of. 565 are women, 435 are men. And what do you want to tell us? How are these 1,000 people selected?
These people are a good part, all of our health programs. And then last year I realized, actually at the turn of this year and last year, Panzironi come and have dinner with us. It was this tour I did all over Italy, where I met with more than 5,000 people who follow the Life 120 lifestyle. And out of those, we decided to include 1,000 people who suffer from at least 3 diseases.
And now let's talk about the effect. Life 120 lifestyle on osteoarticular diseases and disorders. I would say right away, let's look at neck pain, because we have a slide where 69% of the people stated that they were cured of this disorder, and 27 got good improvements. If we go instead to see regarding the medications they were taking, 89% stated that they are no longer taking medications, and 5% have reduced the dose.
Let's say that on osteoarticular pathologies. You think that lifestyle doesn't have anything to do with it, but instead we have actually shown in our episodes of The Health Seeker, and also with this observational study, that by changing diet and doing proper supplementation, really you can get results just on the inflammatory factors that induce the pain and metabolic changes in the osteoarticular system. In this case, we have extraordinary results.
Let's move on to some extraordinary results, if you will allow me to comment also on arthrosis and arthritis, because out of 386 people who suffered from it, 71% said they were cured of it, and 27% got an improvement, only 2% got no results. On the other hand, as far as taking drugs, 95% of the subjects said they no longer use drugs, plus 2% said they changed the dose.
We decided in this case to ask a general question by not distinguishing arthritis from osteoarthritis, because they know that they have an osteoarticular problem because they feel the pains, and yet in each case we have seen that there is an important resolution in terms of recovery from both conditions.
And so here we go a little bit more specific, because we go to the knee joint pain. 82% reported that they were cured of this disorder and 18% got an improvement. Hence also an important figure that 96% of the subjects are no longer using drugs.
This is a very interesting figure that should give pause for thought to the class of physicians, the orthopedists who deal precisely with these problems, because we know that patients are followed for life with infiltrations that are then, in any case, palliative, and well, by following the Life 120 style, actually almost more than 80% no longer use drugs and return to having knee joint function exactly as they did before they became ill with this condition.
So we go from knee joint pain to hip joint pain. I see that from the slide of 74% stated that they are cured of this disorder, plus 26 got an improvement. So practically 100% we get, and 86% instead told us that they are no longer using drugs, with 14% having reduced the dose.
This is a really important figure, because we know that people who suffer from hip pain problems then are destined over time to clearly undergo surgeries. And we know that 25% of people undergo these operations and do not exceed 1 year of life. So this means that these people from the Life 120 people who have undertaken this lifestyle and have reported cures on this disease are actually saving their lives, and so will all the people who decide to follow this lifestyle.
I would like to submit to you, Mr. Panzironi, and also, of course, to our audience at home, the slide on low back joint pain, because we see that 78% of the people reported being cured of this disorder and 19% achieved improvement. If we go to look at the medication part of taking medication, 88% of the subjects stated that they no longer used any, and 10% reduced the dose.
A figure that really gives us pause for thought, because we know that these pathologies are considered as incurable by dogmatic medicine. Obviously, if we have a herniated disc for official medicine, this is a little bit on the other side of progressing over time. Instead, we have shown with this observational study, but also with all the witnesses who come to the health seeker, that by changing lifestyle, then reducing those inflammatory factors, you also reduce disc herniations, and therefore you get back to having proper function.
A large proportion of the people in our court also suffered from joint pain in the shoulder. Of these, 82% said that they were cured of this disorder. And we can also add a 15% of the people who got an improvement to joint pain in the shoulder. If we go to see with regard to taking medication for this type of issue, we have 90% of the subjects who stated that they no longer use any, and 5% have reduced the dose.
This shows that regardless of where we have the osteoarticular problem, simply by eating well and following the Life 120 lifestyle, we reduce those inflammatory activities that lead to the resolution of that joint pain as it had appeared.
Now let's move on to the tendinitis slide. Here we have 75% of people who reported being cured of this disorder, plus 17% got an improvement.
Tendonitis is inflammation of the tendons. So it's clear that if the body gets back to reducing and if not eliminating inflammation, even tendonitis tends to go away.
Let's move on to the trigger finger. This is also a condition that we have often talked about in our health search as well. And we have 84% of people who said that they have been cured of this condition, and 13% have achieved improvement.
We have seen precisely in our witnesses in the health seeker this condition that seems in quotes incurable except by surgery. Actually, those who do the Life 120 lifestyle have a reduction in the inflammation of the sheath, and thus the tendon goes back to flowing properly, and thus the problem of the trigger finger is eliminated.
We always go to a hand problem, but here we go to carpal tunnel. In the court, 80% said they were cured of it. Obviously, in the part of the court that suffered from this problem, 80% were cured and 18% got an improvement. Di questa problematica l'80% è guarita e il 18% ha ottenuto un miglioramento.
This condition is also treated surgically by this dogmatic medicine, and instead this observational study shows that by following a correct lifestyle, then doing the right supplementation, by eating the right things, you reduce those inflammatory actions that lead precisely to the carpal tunnel problem. So as it came, this pathology very often heals.
Then we did a unique slide for generic osteoarticular pain to encapsulate these other case histories, and we saw that out of 220 people who had this type of issue, 74% said they were cured of it and 24 got an improvement. Another important fact that I read, of course, from the records is that 91% of the people who were previously taking medications stated that they were no longer taking them. Dei soggetti che prima assumeva dei farmaci ha dichiarato di non assumerli più.
We have to remember that when there is inflammation, one of the effects of inflammation is pain. So you reduce the inflammation, you eliminate the inflammation, and the pain goes away. These are the results of following a Life 120 lifestyle.
And now we go to the osteoporosis slide. Here we have 40% who said they were cured of this condition and 45% who said they had improvements from this issue. And let's go to see in terms of taking medications instead. 65% said they no longer use medications and 6% have reduced the dose.
An important figure is also this, because we know that especially women over time tend to reduce the quality of bone, and well, this should be considered a real pathology, and therefore, like all other degenerative diseases, in the moments when we go back to eating well and go back to properly supplementing those nutrients that allow us of putting the bone back in a condition to rebuild itself, we have real cures from a condition that is considered incurable by this dogmatic medicine.
These data are really resounding what we read and what we got from this longitudinal observational research, but what should they teach this medicine that, as you call, dogmatic?
There is a different path of treatment, that you cannot deal with the pathology and health of people only by administering drugs. But let your patient know that proper nutrition is the first therapeutic weapon. Then if ever it is not enough, then you can also administer drugs but not do the opposite. So really this longitudinal observational study will teach these doctors that a different path is possible, an integrated path. That can really bring millions of Italians back to health if we remember these percentages that I call almost bulgar, i.e. extraordinary results, and we wanted to represent them in the Italian population. Well, we would have the 90% reduction of drugs in Italy, we would have the 90% reduction of the sick industry, and we would have millions of healthier and longer-lived people.
I want to mention that all these data that we have said, the cards, the 1,000 cards of our court, are within this book written 4 years with our journalist Francesco Gianotti, obviously together with Adriano Panzironi. However, I also want to say another very important thing, that all the data in our possession, the telephone records that were made to carry out this longitudinal observational study, are obviously protected thanks to Life 120. So whoever wants can contact obviously the competent authorities and know obviously all the data. I thank you, Mr. Panzironi, for doing also this very important new work that I recommend obviously to everybody. I thank you. I thank those who followed us from home, and obviously see you soon with the Health Seeker. Thank you.